Hooligans, we back for the Hooligans League playoff preview. Can't believe we are already here. It's nuts, exciting, stressful, sad. It's week 15 already. There are only 3 weeks left in the fantasy season, which means that there's only a few more episodes to go. And honestly, this is really like the last episode. I will do some drops in between the weeks, but we're not covering as much. During the playoffs, you're kind of on your own. You got to keep track of what everyone else is doing. I can't do it for you. And of course, we'll have a season finale after this, but I don't know exactly what the next couple of weeks will look like from a podcast standpoint. But this week, we will get into it. We'll cover just about everything that we normally do, and then a little more. And yeah, it's going to be a fun one. So, to those that made the playoffs, to those that are in the toilet bracket,
you suck.
And let's just have some fun. So, let's not waste any more time. Week 15, Hooligans League playoff preview. Let's go.
Best in the business when it comes to a quarterback sneak.
Let's go! Let's go! Let's go! Let's go! Let's go! Let's go! Let's go!
And that's how it goes. I'm going to miss that song. It gets me fired up when I'm about to record this. It gets me going. But I don't even need it this week because we are at the playoffs. We had a pretty crazy week last week, a very weird week of fantasy. A lot of teams were out, but it didn't mean that teams weren't scoring. It was definitely unexpected. This episode will be, I called last week the regular season finale, but this feels more like the regular season finale. We have just about everything in this episode that we normally do, and then a little bit more. We're going to talk about last week. We're going to talk about the regular season and all the final stats, prizes, things of that nature. Then we're going to get into what usually is the weekly preview, but this week it's more about the playoff preview. And that's really it. It's not that complicated. I'm getting this episode out early because it's playoff time. And once you're in, lineup management, you don't need any distractions from me. So let's start off by talking week 14.
It's time for a weekly review.
So week 14 was crazy. Starting off with this first matchup, another banger.
A holy banger of a matchup.
We had me versus Silverman. Early in the matchup, it looked like Silverman had it in the bag. But Josh Allen and Puka Nacua went fucking crazy, combining for 80 points, I think, which gave me the lead. I needed to score at least 1 point to secure the number 1 seed. I scored 2, beating Dan 186 to 173. I did not check to see if this broke the record for highest scoring matchup of all time. I know we talked about that at the trade party, and that was Andrew and Rick. And I don't know if this passed that. We'll have to review all the records once the season is over. But yes, Rick, very fitting of Silverman to lose with 173.76 points. Very fitting. He's been getting hosed all year long. Not that it mattered. This one didn't really cost him anything, but just a fitting end to the story of Silver Surfer Schlong. Next up, we had Rick versus James. We said that the loser of this would automatically not get a bye. So this was in a very important matchup. Rick beats James by 28. Not that James had a bad week. It just was not good enough. He scores 131. Rick puts up nearly 160, putting him in position. He did what he needed to do to get a bye. Was it enough? Unfortunately for him, Dan Santola had an even bigger week, doubling up Caveney. He literally doubled him up. 185 to 92. Gotta be one of the biggest beatings we've ever seen in this league. A piss poor, pathetic performance from Mr. Caveney himself. I mean, there's no question here. Dan was getting the victory when he was up around 160 and Caveney hadn't even broken 80. But damn. Jamar Chase puts on another show to make it even worse. Dan needed a win, and a 2-0 win basically would have secured a first round bye for him. We'll see if it was enough. Then we had Jovi versus Andy. And Jovi needed a big week, a very, very, very big week, and a terrible week from Caveney to not come in last. He got the terrible week from Caveney, only 92 points from Caveney. Unfortunately for Jovi.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
91 points. Pathetic. He had a shot to not come in last, and he doesn't even come close to doing it. Which certainly helped out Andy, because he needed to at least score 1 point. Ideally, he wanted 2 points if he was going to make the playoffs. And Andy did his part. He got at least 1 point by beating Jovi 138, we'll call it 139 to 91. Was it enough? Then we had Radler putting up a huge week in a pretty meaningless game for him. Maybe he could have secured a first round bye in the bracket, in the toilet bracket, but not too much on the line for him, but he says, fuck it anyways. Let me cause some chaos. First it was Ty. Now it's Chow he's causing chaos for. Beats him 160 to 101. Now remind you, if Chow went 2-0, he was securing his spot in the playoffs. If he went 1-1, pretty solid chance he makes the playoffs. But if he goes 0-2, those chances go down drastically. And Chow the week before was the number one scoring team in the league. So he obviously was coming into this week feeling pretty good. But boy, did his team let him down. I know that Packers stack did not score well, but clearly a lot of teams didn't score well for him, because he barely crossed the 100-point threshold. Not a good time to do it. And then last, we have Chris and Dick. Chris is trying to steal a first round bye. He needs a 2-0 week. Dickie has really nothing to fight for, just chaos, and decided this week wasn't the week he would cause that chaos. Chris beats him pretty comfortably, 149 to 128. So let's talk about the median monster. Yes. So this week we got a median again. The week before we had none. This week, I mean, we talked about it. Dan scored 103.76 points. Obviously, that's enough to win the median matchup. The median this week was extremely high, though. Extremely high. 143.87, the highest median we have had all season long. So that 173 by Dan was huge if he wants to just improve his record. Andy, on the other hand, he unfortunately kind of got fucked by the median being so high in a week where it was crucial for him to score as many points as possible. He scores 139, but it's not enough. So he loses to the median and goes 1-1 despite winning his matchup and scoring 139. That's really shitty. I mean, these are pretty crazy 1-1s. 173.76 and you go 1-1, and 139 you go 1-1. Sucks to suck, but that's what it does. Let's talk cash prizes. So I got the $20 prize with my big week. What do we got here? Bang! And then Dan Santola just right behind me, 1.5 points away from getting $20 instead of 10, but I'm sure he's still happy about his money.
Bang! Bang! It's good! Wins the game at the buzzer!
The last time we are giving out a weekly prize. So congrats, Dan. I know you got a bunch of these. Feels good to finish the season off on top. I haven't got one of these $20 in a while. And sorry for those that were really banking on some money here because you don't have many chances to win more for the rest of the season. Got one more weekly financial thing to talk about. Penalties. Joe V, brother. Joe V, man. You're fighting for last to not come in last. And you're getting hit with a penalty for not filling your roster in the final week of the season. Now, I know it was By-Mageddon. And I believe it was Monday Night Football. But you got to make plans. You had to make plans. Figure something out. Because McConkey's been hurt for a while. He has been battling injuries for weeks since before you got him. So him being an injury risk was always a pretty strong reality. And it was pretty early in the week where signs started to point to him not playing, but you didn't make a backup plan. And by Monday Night Football, there was really nothing you could do. Or was this Sunday Night Football? This was Sunday Night Football. And so you had a little bit more time. But you got a big fat 0 out in your lineup, did not play. That is a $10 penalty, and that goes to the first place prize. So unfortunate for you, especially when you haven't won much money this year. So here we would normally talk buys, injuries, fab, waivers.
Surprise, motherfucker.
We ain't doing that this week. We ain't doing that this week because you are on your own. I'm not giving you information that will help you tinker with your lineups, that will help you know about your opponent's lineups. Nah, you got to do all the research on your own. Not that it's a lot, but you get no help. You got to actually pay attention to the league. You can't just watch the podcast. I'm sure there aren't people who just watch the podcast, but you're on your own. So in this segment, I actually want to just talk about the fab rules. So I've already done it. You probably saw it come in. All toilet bracket teams, non-playoff teams, all your fab's gone. bumped down to 0. You got none. You're also bumped down in waiver priority. So if you were first, you are now 7th. If you were 10th, you're probably 11 or 12 now, because the 6 playoff teams are 1 through 6, and the 6 toilet bracket teams are 7 through 12. And when teams get eliminated from the playoffs, they will also get bumped down and lose their fab. So that's already through. You should already see that. Also, once you get eliminated, completely eliminated, and so that means, like, let's say you lose your playoff game and now you're in the 5 versus 6 matchup, and you lose that, or you win that, I guess, because you're out of the playoffs at that point. Your team will be completely locked. You won't be able to do shit. So make your moves while you can, but teams in the playoffs it'll be easier for them to make moves. And I feel like we've come to a pretty good place with this. You should see this. It's already in Sleeper. I updated it. I took a screenshot of what things were before. So if you feel like I fucked up somewhere, let me know, and I will double check what you were before I made changes, and can update it to make sure it's accurate. But I'm pretty sure I did everything right. So that's week 14. That is the end of the regular season. Now let's look at how everything played out. So up top, obviously, I think everyone is fully aware of this. We got me and Dan Santola with first round buys in first and second place for the regular season standings. Back to back number 1 overall seed for this guy. Will I finally do something with it? Who knows? I doubt it. I mean, I would take the field if it was me versus the field, but obviously where I want to be. Dan Santola also hasn't won a championship in his hooligan career. And thank you, Rick, for pointing out we are the only 2 tier 2 managers in the Hooligoat rankings who have yet to win a title. That's the only thing missing from our resume. Dan has a long history of making the playoffs. And I have a pretty good history of having some great seasons, especially in recent years. Neither of us have a title. Neither of us have a chip. But we've done what we needed to do to put us in the best position possible. And so we lead off the standings at 1 and 2. Then we have Chris, Rick, and James, all in the same spots they were last week. All 3 of those teams were trying to steal a position from me and Dan, but none of them could do it because Dan and I were both the 1 and 2 scorers in the league, respectively. But pretty solid performances. Well, pretty solid performances for Rick and Chris, who both went 2-0. James goes 0-2, but stays at 5th. And still a very respectable season with his 16-12 record. But in 6th, the story of the week, Andy secures a playoff spot. What they gonna say now? What they gonna say now? Quoting Jason Tatum, this is what they said. Nothing. Got nothing to say. Respect to Andy. It's a consistent story with him. He's won 2 championships, won the first ever won his second championship years later, has been to multiple finals, had a shit ton of terrible luck this year, navigated it beautifully, had more bad luck happen. Team is sinking. It looks like he really doesn't have a shot to make the playoffs. And then pulls off 2 trades that are questionable. They look dumb, and Andrew proves to be right again. It used to be he'd make quiet moves that would pay off. Now he's making loud, bold moves that everybody sees, and they're paying off. This is just like an impressive feat by Andy to even make the playoffs this year. So shout out to you. Very impressed. Very clear, beautiful demonstration of why you are tier 1 manager. But my praise for you ends here, because I'm only rooting for myself now. Now, I will admit that there was a point at the trade party where I was sitting with a couple managers. I think Dan Santola was one of them. I forget who else was there. And I said, how do we get Andy's team in the playoffs? How do we make sure he makes the playoffs? Because it doesn't look very good. And I would love to have an easier path. And Dan and I, we weren't actually being serious. I think I was the one driving the conversation. But we ended up making trades with Andy, and he made the playoffs. So Operation Get Hawkeye Tua to the playoffs is complete. Now we got to see what he's going to do with it. And if he were to beat me in the championship, I would lose my mind, but that's a long time away. So congrats, Andy. Pretty impressive stuff. You deserve to be in the playoffs.
Every time.
You gotta give him that hawk.
Tier 1 manager. It's a tier 1 manager. In the second half of the playoffs, or the standings, I should say, obviously, if Andy made it, that means that Chow did not. That is that's honestly sad.
No!
That you had a great run as well. Chow, you made a lot of moves throughout the year. You fought through a lot of adversity. You kept your team afloat. You kept climbing up the standings. You eventually got the 6th seed, and you had a pretty good control of it. And all you needed to do was avoid one bad week. But of course, the fantasy gods said, fuck no. And since you won a couple years ago, two seasons ago, you won, I'm not that mad about it. But damn, shout out to you for your management this year. It was awfully impressive. And I thought with the trades you had made, you finished off the job, but your team had other plans. So now you are at the top of the standings for the toilet bracket. You alone at 14-4, the final team to have a 500 record or better. And let's see what you can do with it. Dan Silverman remains the 8th seed at 12-16. Radler, also 12-16, is the 9. And then we have Dick at 10-18. It's a lot of losses, but who cares? If you don't make the playoffs, you're basically all the same. Caveney, same thing. You lost more than a third of your games. That's not the most fun season. You're currently on an 8-game losing streak. Damn. Dick, I do have to point out, you started getting loud and then you lost 6 straight games. If Caveney hadn't lost 8 straight games, I probably would have shit on you there. But Caveney, damn, 8 straight. You were 9-11 and you ended up 9-19. That is terrible. But don't stress too hard about it, because at least you're not this guy. Jovi, last place, finishes the season 0-4, easily was in position to come back. But his team just didn't perform enough in the final 2 weeks of the regular season. This makes this Jovi's second time coming in last place. We call that a
Double kill.
he came in last his first ever season in the league. He won last year, and then he comes in last again this year. Thank you for taking that honor. So none of us have to wear it. I expect you to wear it with pride and joy. And yeah, whoever has the last place medal, let's make sure we get that to Jovi. Now let's talk the money. And this shit's fucking crazy, dude. Okay, so we already talked about the 1 seed. I am the back-to-back 1 seed owner. I get $100. Very happy to get that $100. I was nervous, but my team performed the last 2 weeks and got it done. The rest is fucking crazy. Crazy. Dan Santola walks away with everything else. He's the 2 seed, $20. Ka-ching. He scored the most points in the league, $50. Ka-ching. He already had won the survivor pool, $50. Ka-ching. And of course, no one passed him for the best week of the year, another $50. Ka-ching, 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 ka-ching. You can't even, that's a lot of fucking money. He cleaned up the regular season awards. The only thing that would have topped it up if he ended up passing me for the 1 seed. That is $170 from regular season prizes alone. Almost pays for his entry to the league from just these awards. Pretty damn impressive. So, all I got to do is just, give it up to you. Because that's, man. I don't have much else to say, but good shit. Actually, I do have more to say. Because I was looking at some of the stats. And your season could have been even more dominant from a points perspective. I was looking at the max points for, which Sleeper does a good job keeping track of. You see it in the weekly reports of how many points you could have scored if you optimized your lineup based on how people did. And your max points was 113 more than anyone else as well. So you could have had even higher in this category. And then I was looking at, okay, who had bad points for max potential? And let's see, we got Joe, Dick, and Caveney. Even if they played the perfect player every single week, they still wouldn't have scored as much as Dan, Rick, Chris, me, or Silverman. So that's how bad their teams were from a points perspective. They didn't even crack 1,700. Joe didn't even crack 1,600. But if you look at other teams who did okay, I mean, if Andy played a perfect player every week, he doesn't outscore what Dan actually did. If Chow played a perfect lineup every week, he doesn't either. If Radler has a perfect, he doesn't either. Even James, who is in 5th place in the league, if he plays the perfect lineup every week, he doesn't outscore Dan Santola's actual points. It's pretty wild. But I think the major point here is that Dan left a lot of points on the board. But don't worry, he wasn't the only one. Few managers had great seasons when it came to accuracy and playing the right people. Chris and I both tied for 93.3% accuracy rate, only leaving about 140 points on the table, which can be seen as good. Like we've been good about who we start, or it can be seen as bad that our teams haven't been that deep and there haven't been missed opportunities for points, which obviously you would love to have your max points be as high as possible. But we were the most accurate this year. And then Andy was right behind us at 92.5%, did give a few more points away. But I don't know. It's, I guess, interesting to see that the three most accurate teams did make the playoffs. We had two teams that were right around 90%. That appears to be like probably the measuring stick in between 91% accuracy, at least according to this year, seems to be what you want to strive for. Silverman was right there, right under 91%. And then Chow was right there at just over 90%. Neither of these teams made the playoffs, though. So does this mean anything? Probably not, but thought it would be interesting to share. And then a lot of teams didn't do well. Rick and Caveney, the clear least accurate teams, the least accurate managers. Caveney makes perfect sense. He had multiple guys go off on his roster this year. Just go off huge. I remember there was a point where like every single week he was missing like a 20 to 30 point scorer who was on his bench, usually a wide receiver. So I wasn't surprised to see him have 228 points on his bench that could have gone to his starting lineup. Rick's number is crazy, 264.56. He's had some costly mistakes. I remember with DeAndre Hopkins versus Worthy. His tight ends scored like 50 points on his bench at one point when he was still playing Kyle Pitts. So a pretty big number for points missed. But the other team I'll point out here is his brother Dan. As I started this segment, had was tied for the third most points left off, or like percentage points, the second most overall. So his points for could have been like 2,300 points. It's crazy how many points his team has scored this year. So that's interesting. Here's everybody. I think 91% accuracy is the target. That's the goal. If you can get up to 93, you're really maximizing your team. And if you're below 90, you probably got a loss somewhere because of it. At least one. Let's talk points against. I mean, this is a story we always talk about, but I figured I'd dive in a little bit deeper. Big range of points against. A nearly 400 point discrepancy between the team with the most points against and the least. Silverman, as we know, has been basically the leader in this category all year long. He scored 215 points more than the median number, which was 1827. The gap is so big that the second most was Dickey, and Dan had 65 more than him. And the third most was Andy, who had nearly 80 less than Dick. So Dick got royally fucked, as he normally does. But Dan got it even worse. And then everyone else is pretty close. Besides, until you get all the way down to Dan Santola was the second most or fewest points against, and he was only 91 less than the median. And then Radler had by far the easiest schedule with 143 points less than the median number. But even that is basically his Radler's luck is basically equivalent to Dick's luck, and then Dan, but the opposite, I should say, the inverse to Dick's luck. And then Dan had it even worse by a 70-point margin. It's just pretty nuts how many points Dan did have against him. So yeah, that's the regular season. Do want to talk about where we ended up with the money. Dan Santola, the clear winner in cash earned from the regular season. I already mentioned he won the 3 different regular season awards and the number 2 seed that comes with $20. He won his rivalry week. He was the number 1 scorer 3 times, the number 2 scorer 2 times. So basically more than 1 out of every 3 weeks he was winning money. And he was never a bottom scorer, which is pretty damn impressive. He's already earned back his buy-in and then some. Good stuff for him. I was a second, but not a close second. Dan had more than twice the amount of money I did. I had $150 earned back. Did not win rivalry week. Fuck you, Dickie. Only had 3 number 1 scores. Most of my money actually came from the number 1 seed $100 prize. And then everyone else is much below me. Is significantly below me. Chow actually ended up being the 3rd place team for money earned in the regular season. He had 3 different number 1 scores, and he won rivalry week, earning him $70. So I doubled Chow for 2nd place, and Dan doubled me for 3rd. And then everywhere is somewhere between $0 and $50. James at 50. We had Chris, Rick, and Silverman at 40. Radler at 20, and then Dick at 10 from rivalry week. The only money he got was from me. 3 teams did not make a cent. Caveney won $10 for coming in second once, but he lost rivalry week, so that money gets wiped off the board. Joe V won $20 for coming in first 1 week, but lost rivalry week and then had that $10 penalty. And then Andy came in second once, but also lost rivalry week. So 3 managers haven't won any money. I will say, though, that Andy is already guaranteed to make some money for making the playoffs. So he does have that.
I'm Pickle Rick!
The last thing for the review, and this will be the last time we do this until the end of the season, is the Pickle Tracker, the Rick Tracker. We won't be making updates to this each week because I'm not going to have people knowing exactly what Rick is doing. If you want to pay attention, you can in the sleeper chat. But last week, Rick was at 93, and now he's only at 95. So it's going to come down close. He's going to need to win this week if he's going to break 100. So I'm kind of hoping he does, even though that means he would be playing me next week, which I don't love. But it's okay. Get to 100, Rick. So that does it for our week 14 review and the regular season review. I do have one more thing before we get to the playoff preview. And that is a hooligan flashback. So we are talking hooligan flashbacks. There was one perfect moment there's one moment that is perfect for this episode, and it's actually a flashback to something earlier this year. I tried to avoid all season when I would do these, covering something from this year or even last year. But this one, we need to rewind the tape. We need to. Because this one is oh, this might hurt. I'm sure he's well aware of this, but this one's going to sting a little bit. And I'm not sure if everyone caught on to this. So this one's fucked by Jones because many of us in our fantasy careers have been fucked by Daniel Jones before, but none of them have been quite like this one. Flashback to week 8. Week 8, Monday Night Football. Steelers versus Giants. There was a lot of teams who were still going head to head. This might have been one of the very first Monday night previews I did, now that I think about it. It was either the first or second, because I realized how many games were being decided on Monday Night Football. And so Silverman and Dickey are head to head. Silverman had just had a couple bad losses when he scored a good amount of points. And Dick, at that time, I believe he was on the rise. This was during his hot streak when he started 0-8, actually. Yeah, he started 0-8, and I think he might have won 2 or 3 in a row at this point. But they go into Monday Night Football, and Silverman has a 23.2 lead. He's done, though. He has no one else to play. Dickey has Daniel Jones and the Steelers defense. Weird scenario. Every time the Giants and Daniel Jones scores a touchdown, that hurts the Steelers, but anytime he makes a fuck up, like an interception, it helps the Steelers. So Dickey's floor is kind of guaranteed to get a decent amount of points, but it does limit his ceiling a little bit. And I want to say the projections had it extremely close that this was going to come down to the wire, and it did. So let's flash forward towards the end of the game. The final drive of the game, the Steelers lead the Giants 26-18. Giants have the ball. Daniel Jones has honestly had like one of the worst case scenarios for Dick, besides like an injury. He only has 205 passing yards and 1 rushing yard. He has 0 touchdowns. He also has 0 interceptions. He has been sacked 4 times and lost a fumble. So he's been bad enough to get Dickey in the Steelers defense a few points, but he hasn't been bad enough to get them enough points, and he hasn't been good enough to get them enough points. It's like this really shitty situation. So on the last drive, Dickey needs 2.9 points. And Daniel Jones at this point only has like maybe 5. So the odds are not in his favor, but he can win with 75 yards. He can win with a pick 6. He could win with Daniel Jones getting some yards. And then he throws an interception. He could win if he gets a bunch of sacks on this drive. So it's honestly probably, I don't know, 60-40 Dan to Dick. Like Dan's definitely the favorite, but there's a lot of outs for Dick. And so this drive begins and it goes pretty damn well for Dick. First play, Daniel Jones gets 9 yards. Next play, 7 more yards. So there we have it. He's already up about 0.6 points. Next play, incomplete. Next play, 25 yards. Okay, so Dickey has like 1.6 points that he scored. He only needs 1.3 more. All right, 3-yard pass. All right, that's not going to do much, but it's something. Then a 15-yard pass. All right, we're getting there. We are getting there. Dick needs, I think, like 0.5 points at this point to win. And of course, Daniel Jones throws an interception, getting Dickey 1 point because the Steelers get 2 points for the interception and Daniel Jones only loses 1. That does it. This drive wins Dickey the matchup. He wins by 0.46 points. 140.86 to 140.4. Silverman loses on Monday Night Football, scoring 140 plus. If Daniel Jones would have thrown an interception two plays earlier, Dan wins. If Jones fumbles and loses the ball instead of throwing a pick, Dan wins. But instead, he gains about 60 yards and then throws an interception, which is the perfect amount Dick needs to win this matchup. To make matters worse, the league median this week was ridiculously high at 140.63. So Dan doesn't even win the league median. Whoever won this matchup was going to be the final team to get into the median. So Dickie and Daniel Jones prevented Dan from getting not 1, but 2 points to his record. Dan goes 0-2 instead of 2-0. Very important to mention. Because if Dan had ended up winning that game instead of Dick, if Daniel Jones threw that pick earlier in the possession or fumbled instead, Dan is 14-14 and is in the playoffs. That single drive determined if Dan made or missed the playoffs. Monday Night Football madness. Because Dan had scored more points than Andy and Chow, so he would have won the tiebreaker on all three of them. So Andy, you should be thankful to Daniel Jones. Dick, you're really just a secondary character in this story because it didn't really impact you either way. Your team sucks. Silverman, you got fucked by Daniel Jones, and he wasn't even on your team. And that's not the only time he got fucked. I do want to flash back to a couple other moments. Week 5, you were the number 4 scorer in the league. You lost. Week 6, you were the number 2 scorer in the league and lost. Then week 8, you had this 0-2 swing with 140 plus points. Week 12, you were again the number 4 scorer in the league and lost. And then just this week, you scored 173.76 points and lost. So either if Daniel Jones doesn't fuck you, or if any two of these weeks you play someone else, you're probably in the playoffs. So, Silverman, sorry to make you revisit the pain, but this had to be the hooligan flashback of this week because it shows just how close teams are to making and missing the playoffs. But you still have the toilet bracket to compete for, so do not give up. So with that, now we officially move on to the playoffs. Hooligans League, it's time. It's time for the playoff preview. And I don't have, a ton to share here. But I did feel that it was time to really switch gears and move it over. Whoops. So, let's move on to the playoff preview. Regular season means shit now. It's irrelevant. It's all what you can do over the next 3 weeks. A lot of luck, but also a lot of hard decisions to be made. So let's dive into it.
Weekly preview.
All right, so power rankings this week. And really, this is for the playoffs. I will not be releasing updated power rankings week by week. There's really no need because it's a very clear path that each team is on. So this will be the final power rankings of the year. And they are broken up into 2 rankings. We have the top half, which is for playoff teams and playoff teams only. So all you piss poor, pathetic performing teams, you ain't getting on that list for shit. You go on the bottom. And we're going to start with you first. So in last in the power rankings for the playoffs, we got Jovi. Not much of a surprise here. He's in last place in the league. He's in last place for the power rankings. Fantasy Pros hates his team. He was terrible last week. I forgot to mention, I think, so Joe V came in last for the week. I think that was his 5th time this year being the lowest scoring team of the week. So last week we had him in the 10 spot. He has to be down here at 12. Not much more to say about his team. Vinny, I know you don't watch the podcast that often, so you're probably not laughing at Joe's team. But if you were, you shouldn't be. Because it's not great, Bob. Not great. You're the 11th spot. Your team actually is decent, according to Fantasy Pros, number 8 for the rest of the season. But they have you at 12 this week. So your pursuit of a toilet bracket championship, I don't even want to use the word championship because it's not a championship. Toilet bracket victory is not great. Not great. You were 11 in points scored last week. You're projected to be 12th this week, according to Fantasy Pros. Not good, but you're alive. You are competing for the $50. So do manage effectively. Dick and Radler, you are 10 and 9, respectively. Dick, your team sucks, just not the most. You're on the come up. You're back up to 10. You're the number 18 this week, according to Fantasy Pros, and 10 rest of season. Scored the 9th most points last week. You got a chance. You just gotta do it. If not, then you'll be going home with just $10 this year, but a very valuable $10. I know you really enjoy it. Radler, you were hot last week. Can you keep riding that? You scored 160. That's definitely enough to get you a win and move closer to the toilet bracket final. So good luck, sir. Then we have the 2 favorites. Chow, you fell 3 spots. You were in the top 6. It looked like you had the playoffs in your hands. Your team fucking choked. They choked. You scored 175 points the week before, though. So you have a week to bounce back. You don't have to play this week. See what Jaden Reed does. See how your team performs. Give them the pep talk. It's a bye. You got time to do it. Get them ready for week 16 when you fight to compete in the toilet bowl final. You're one of the best teams in this bracket anyways. The 7th best team across the league rest of season, according to Fantasy Pros. So do what you got to do. Silverman, same thing. But boy, are you a favorite. You are a favorite. So we will see if your team fails you. One thing I will note that when I was looking through the weeks to kind of get the last data points ready to see how many times you got fucked in those weeks, but your team was shit a lot of weeks. It wasn't like every single week you were getting a lot of points scored on you. I mean, it kind of was, but like you were losing with 110 points. So there was a lot of weeks that your team didn't score. They didn't perform. But then when they did, you got fucked. So it's not a given. You got to play the right people. But you have the talent. If I had just normal power rankings, you would have been 5th, I believe. Maybe 4th. If you see here, your power score is a 4.6. You are You're the number 2 team this week, even though you're on bye. You're the number 3 team rest of season, and you're actually tied with me. So you could have easily been 2. And you were the number 3 team in scoring last week, but you scored 175 points. Normally that's good for 1. Your team is fucking good. You got fucked, as we talked about. Now you got to go and win this fucking bracket. You have a week to figure out how you're going to manage your team. So go and get it, because you are the favorite and it's not close. Let's move to the playoff bracket, the real playoffs. Andy, you do not belong here by the metrics. You are the worst team rest of season in our league. You are the 11th team this week. You were only 7th in points last week, but you got your win. But you're in 6th place. So when I say you don't belong, maybe it's more that you may not deserve it, or your team doesn't belong. You as a manager deserve it, but your team is not like the rest of them. It's going to be a tough hill for you to climb to win the playoffs, but I've seen teams get hot, and you know how to pull the right levers at the right time. And you're going to need to keep doing that if you're going to win it all. You got an 8.8 in your power score. You would have been 9th if it was one straight power ranking. James, you're 6.2. You're number 6 rest of season. Your team has cooled down a little bit. You have a lot of depth, though. So you definitely have the players to win it all. It might just be a little hard to predict which guys to play. And that is a position I would hate to be in. It is very stressful. But you've been a top 3 team for most of the year until as of late. So you just got to keep fighting, and I can easily see your team winning it all. Then we got Rick and Chris. Rick and Chris both fall down to 3 and 4. The big question mark for Rick is Breece Hall. When he acquired Barkley, that trade was alarming for 2 reasons. 1, he just got the best player in fantasy, but 2, holy fuck, Rick's running backs are now Barkley, Kyron Williams, and Breece Hall. But Breece Hall is injured, didn't play last week. Who knows if he plays this week? That one player could be the determining factor if you win it all. Regardless, your team is still very fucking good. You're 4th rest of season right behind me and Dan. You're 4th this week. You were 5th in points last week, and you have tons of home run hitters with high floors. It's a scary team. But it might come down to Breece Hall if you're going to win it all. Or Barkley just carries your ass to a championship. But I'm sure you are sweating. You're going to be sweating these playoffs a lot. And then Chris, similar position. He doesn't have a bye week. His team's full of talent. The number 1 team rest of season according to Fantasy Pros. But he has to win 3 games to win a championship. And his team has cooled off. 3.0 in the power score. The only thing really hurting him is last week he was 6th in points. Actually, Chris was originally supposed to be the number 2 in the power rankings. But that bye week is so damn valuable that I had to give it to Dan. So Dan is number 2. He was number 3 originally, but you add in the first round bye, You add in the fact that his team scores like 150 plus basically every week since a few weeks ago. The Jamar Chase effect, where he's a guaranteed 20, probably 30. With Lamar Jackson, who's cooled down, so he's probably bound to explode. It's a team that I do not want to play. He is only 5 in the rest of season rankings, but he's been ranked 5 or 6 basically every week for a while and basically never comes lower than 4. So fantasy pros, they get it wrong all the time. Dan's team is fucking stacked, and he's going to be a worthy opponent in the playoffs for whoever he faces. And then I'm at the top, first round bye, number 1 in the standings, just had the biggest week, scoring week of the league, the second highest scoring week of the season to only Dan, and I'm number 2 in Fantasy Pros rest of season. These two top teams are facing some like really annoying injuries. None of my players have gotten hurt, but Kamara's starting quarterback, Carr, is hurt, and then Jacoby Myers, my wide receiver 3, his quarterback's hurt, so the Raiders on quarterback number 3, and then Santola's dealing with more San Francisco running back injuries. Garendo injured, who knows if he plays Thursday Night Football. So injuries aren't playing a massive role in the playoffs yet, but they are making their presence known. So here are the playoff power rankings. I made a couple of adjustments, but if you're mad, just blame the algorithm. Here's all the data there for you. And so to round up the playoffs, before one little surprise, we have the playoff brackets. These are not final, by the way. It could change with stat corrections, but I don't think anything's close enough where it could change. I am on the same side of the bracket as Rick and James, who are playing this week. And then Dan is with Andy and Chris. And those are the 6 teams in the playoffs. The winner of Andy and Chris will play Dan, and the winner of James and Rick will play me. A lot of money on the line. You can't see it because my face is kind of covering it, but right here is a $10. First place gets $900 plus Joe V's penalty of $910. Second place, $500. Third place, $250. Fourth place, $125. Fifth place, $75. And sixth place, $50. So congratulations to all 6 teams here. You have automatically earned $50. Me and Dan, for winning the bye, have automatically earned $125. But $910 is up for grabs. Toilet bracket. We got Chow, Dick, and Caveney all on the same side of the bracket. Chow with the bye. And then Silver Tits, Joe, and Radler on their same side of the bracket, with Dan with the bye competing for $50, the same as coming in 6th place. Not too much to talk about with these matchups we have here. I think Rick has a couple questions that he's got to look at. Is Breece Hall ready? A big one. And then who's his wide receiver 3 going to be? D-Hop, Judy? It's pretty tough. Those are tough questions that Rick's going to have to figure out. His opponent, James, has a lot of questions because he's got a lot of depth. Brian Thomas. Does he play Brian Thomas, one of his 2 tight ends, or Sincere McCormick? He's probably got to choose between one of those 3 guys. And the other matchup, not too many question marks here. Andy pretty much has to play who he has because he doesn't have that many people that are starting caliber. And Chris really has to decide which tight end he plays. He's probably going to Njoku, but it's not like he doesn't have options with Kraft. The real story here is just that this matchup could complete the revenge arc for Andy. Chris mentioned that Andy would regret the trades he made, but not only did those trades help him make the playoffs, he now goes head to head with Chris. Now, there's a very good chance that Chris steamrolls Andy this week, because as I mentioned before, he's the worst team in the league. He's 11th this week, according to Fantasy Pros, and Chris is the number 1 team ranked in Fantasy Pros. But if those players that he traded for come to just explode this week, that'll just be the final touch of Andy's revenge. And if they don't, well, Chris will get his last laugh. Because on paper, those players are not very good. And so them having a bad week is very likely. It's a very likely scenario. So we will see. I don't think Sleeper's updated with Andrew's actual lineup because it's hard to believe that Chris is projected to beat Andy by 41 points, but there is a chance. 144 is a scary number in your projections. Wow. Then the toilet bracket. I'm not going to cover much of this, but Dickey versus Caveney and Joe versus Radler. Winner goes on to play Chow and Dan Silverman. Shit versus shit. We don't need to dive into that. So I want to leave you with one final message, and that is to not give up. I mentioned during the trade party that I had been having a rough go of it. I had no idea what my team was. If they were good, if they were a bad team that was just overperforming or a great team that was just underperforming. And I mentioned that I had written a couple songs for the trade party that I couldn't release because they kept, when I thought they were shit, they would then do good. And then I wrote a song about how they were shit, and then they went off. And then they lost in rivalry week when I had written a song about how good they were. And some of you had said I would like to see those songs, so I took one of them and I figured I would share that with you. It's very short because I did not get far into it before my team went off. And then I was like, oh, fuck yeah, I don't need this song anymore. But I would like to present to you a song about how my team sucked and to show that just a few weeks ago, I felt like complete shit about my team and things can turn around very quickly. So let me introduce you to Dear Marv. My team's gone cold, I'm wondering how I had first place at all. Getting outscored by Dickey, and I can't win at all. And even when I do, it's still not great. Just another median loss. They remind me why I'm not a champ. I'm not a champ. My team's gone cold, I'm wondering how I had first place at all. I'm getting outscored by fucking Dickey, and I can't win at all. And even when I do, it's still not great. Just another median loss. They remind me why I'm not a champ. I'm not a champ at all. Dear Marv, I start you, but you still ain't ballin'. Are you my wide receiver 1, 2, or at the bottom? Planned to draft you back in August, was pumped I got him. It was risky, sure, but I bought into all your stardom. You make me regret getting Puka because you can't hold it down. You've been a wide receiver 3 since he's been out. But Puka, you came back just to get kicked out. I was winning the survivor pool when you would just sit out. Damn. So that's where I was a few weeks ago. I was down and out. I was hating my team. I was stressing. I was sending panic trades. Nothing was working. But it can turn around quickly. Fuck Marv, though. I'm glad he's off my fucking team. That dude's a piece of shit. It can turn around quickly. Nothing matters anymore. Start the right people. Stay focused. Stay locked in. And your team can perform. And you can win this guy. Yes, Joe V, if you're watching, you're probably not. But if you are, this is supposed to be with you right now. And now it's with me. Waiting to be claimed. There is a vacant spot for the 2024 champion. And it is your time. Well, I get only half the league. It's only half the league's time to claim this. So do not give up on your teams. Do what you need to motivate them. If you're on a bye week, hold auditions to see who can start next week. Pick up your players, monitor injuries, do what you need to do to become the champ, whether that's the champ of the Hooligans League or the champ of the shit toilet bracket in your measly $50. It's playoff time. They say pressure burst pipes. Will you blow up? Or will your team blow out? You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? So that's it for the playoff preview. Next week, we'll have a very short mini episode recapping what went down and who's playing next. I have a special segment coming from one of the other 11 league mates that will probably be in the next couple of episodes, maybe the next one. So do look out for that. And yeah, that's it. So dropping this, it's 7:45. I'm going to try to get this out to you all by 8:15 on Tuesday so you can kick off your playoff season the right way. And until we speak again, good luck, motherfuckers. It's been a blast playing in this fantasy league with y'all. I love being in this league. It's the greatest league of all time. And I will see you guys later.
High five.
My team's gone cold, I'm wondering how I had first place at all. Getting outscored by Dickey, and I can't win at all. And even when I do, it's still not great. Just another median loss. They remind me why I'm not a champ. I'm not a champ. My team's gone cold, I'm